Hello, let's talk a little bit about how to make something look photoreal. It's actually a pretty straightforward process. It was something that was, for me, a little intimidating the first time I heard I needed to make something that looked photorealistic. But actually, it's actually a very simple process, and very easy to replicate on your own. So I'm just going to show you generally how to start doing that, and hopefully this little tutorial will help you on your next project. So what we have here, just to start with in this little tutorial, is I've got a file here, and it's got a little box, right? And I've actually just created this box using the polygonal lasso tool, right? Just sort of coming up with all of my sides and just kind of eyeballing it, right? And then doing, a fill for each of these sides. Now, you may have used a similar approach for creating your gray box object that you're going to try and turn into a photoreal looking object or scene, or you may have gone ahead and used a 3D program, something to that effect. Any way that you approach this is just fine. Just remember that the long and short of it is, in order to get a great base for photorealism, you should be starting basically with gray just about every time. You want to make sure that whatever object you have, your geometric object, whether it's a rectangular prism like this or a sphere or something else, remember that it does need to be lit so we can see where the lighting is coming from, and it should be pretty much in a state of readiness to just have a texture added to it. Okay, so about those textures, how do we go about texturing something so that it looks photoreal? Well, a good start is starting with a texture that is a photograph. One of the best places I've found to get such a texture is it's a free website, and it's called Texturescom. Now, you can Google flat textures. There's a number of probably free texture and pay texture sites that are out there. But I tend to use Texturescom. It is, again, a free but limited use site, meaning that you can only take so many textures a day. Usually, for most projects, even a day's worth of textures is more than enough, at the very least, to get you going. So I would definitely recommend this site. It takes a few minutes to sign up. Again, it is free. There is a paywall if you're doing textures all over the place and you want your own texture library. Okay, then go ahead and do that. But this is a great site. One of the things that I like about it is that it does have a really nice array of textures, everything from animal textures to architectural ornamentation. And the other thing that I really like about them is, just the nice variety that we have to look at here. Also, all of these textures, you can see they're photographed pretty much dead on. And the lighting is very, very even, which, as we'll see, is extremely, extremely helpful. Buildings, you can find entire facades of buildings. Just about any kind of facade you can think of is available here, and you can just dig into these, and you just find more and more and more stuff in all of these. It's a really, really fantastic site. I highly recommend it. Texturescom. Okay, so what I've done here is I've actually gone into Texturescom ahead of time, and I grabbed, I believe, a couple of fence posts, and basically I downloaded those images and I went ahead and cut them up to make different sides. We're going to turn this into a board. And remember, basically all you're doing is you're looking for basically the sides of this box. Again, just what you would be doing if you were texturing the object. I mean, perhaps another way to think about it is like a cereal box, right? Up here would be your lid, perhaps. Off to one side, on the front of the box, you might have a cartoon character and a sugary bowl of cereal, and then on the side, you would have all of your nutritional information, right? Obviously, this isn't the right aspect for a box of cereal. So instead, we're going to just go ahead and use these wooden textures to make something very, very simple, just a wooden board. Anytime you select a texture, it's very important to consider a few things. The first thing that you should consider is the lighting. Again, one of the things that I like about these particular textures is that they tend to be very flat. They tend to have very even lighting throughout, which is extremely beneficial because it doesn't conflict then with the lighting that you might have on your object underneath. The second thing to take into consideration is scale. How big does your texture need to be in relation to, something else in your scene? For example, if your character is, this size, this board is going to be way too large. Way, 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 way too large. You wouldn't want something like that. But if you had, a hand or something in the scene, this might be the appropriate size, right? So make sure that you're thinking very, very carefully about your scale. Make sure that you are considering that in relation to objects that your texture is close to, such as a door or a window. Make sure that everything is scaled properly. The next thing to consider is tile, meaning, how does the object look when it repeats? Some textures are actual tiles, right? So they actually do repeat and they look just fine. They should look very, very uniform and in their presentation. Some, like wood, might not, but there are ways to kind of get things to look that way, right? You could sort of imagine a situation where you might copy those and then go to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, and you could sort of see ways in which you could sort of work out a longer board, or perhaps take some of this and sort of stretch it out. You want to make sure that the objects that you have are tileable, otherwise you could end up with kind of a messy situation. Tileable objects are good, especially if you need to suddenly change the scale of something. You want to make your texture smaller so that it better fits with doors and windows nearby. It should be able to scale appropriately, otherwise it's going to look messy. Lastly, the other thing to consider is resolution. You don't want a texture that has a resolution that's too low, otherwise that low resolution is going to look pixelated and ugly. This is especially noticeable if you blow an object up, right? As a smaller object, this looks fine, but if I copy it and I transform it, right, I might not see that pixelation now, but as I move in, we can see these sort of fuzzy edges and stuff, and that's not something that we want, right? We want to keep all of our work so that it looks nice and tight and again, scaled appropriately, whether we're talking about scale in the scene or scale within Photoshop. Okay, so after I process those images, one thing that I tend to do is I go ahead and take those images and I go to Image, Adjust, Desaturate, and I will go ahead and desaturate that material so that it does not have any color. I then go to Adjustments and Levels, and I'll usually tweak this stuff a little bit so that I get darker ambient occlusion and brighter brights on my boards. So why do I do that? Well, one of the things is if I wanted to change the color of these boards, I mean, I can always change it back to sort of this brown color, but if I wanted to change the color of the boards, I could do it a lot easier with a grayscale board than I can with something that is, brownish or something like that. So You can do whatever you want, but this is just the way that I tend to work. Okay, so what I've done here, if we move on, I've gone ahead and taken this object and I've just applied these textures on here. How does that work? Well, what I would do in this particular case, let's just go ahead and delete the boards that I don't need. Right, I'm using this board for this side. So all I've done basically is I've just taken that one board and I've lined it up to a specific corner. I might Control T to transform it, and then I'll go to Edit, Transform, Distort, and I will simply move all of the corners into the respective corners of the image. And that's fine, except that I don't have all of my underlying lighting, so I will actually just set that to overlay. And that lighting will maybe work a little bit better. If I still think it's a little bit light, I might set it to multiply, and I might, change the opacity a little bit so that it's just a little bit lighter. And again, that will help me emphasize some of the lighter parts of the board. So you may have to play around with the layer blending a little bit to get the desired effect. But basically, that's all you're doing, is you're just applying that to one side, and another board to another side, and a third board to this other side over here. It's, again, a pretty straightforward procedure, right? If I remove our central board, right, we've just got this, this, and this. So once I have that that board with the with all of my textures applied properly, all I then need to do is texture that color that object now that it's been textured. So in this case, I've just gone ahead and added a color overlay, and you can see I've got a nice rich kind of a reddish brown hue going on there. If I take my color overlay and I set it to normal, you can see that it's not particularly interesting. It's just a very very basic soft round brush that I've used. Okay, so how would I do that? I would do Control click within that layer. I'd make a new layer on top of that. I'd go into my tool presets and I would grab a soft round brush. Let's see here. Here it is. Airbrush soft. That's good. And I might choose kind of a reddish brown color. And then all I would do is fill that in. Now I do know that there's a little bit more light up here, so one thing that I might do is go with something that is a little bit brighter. And then I would set that to overlay. And again, very, very easily, I've created a really nice color overlay for my wood. If I wanted to change the color of that, I could go to Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and I could just roll it through all of that saturation. Now, I may not want a board that's entirely green, but what if I wanted to? But if I wanted to color one side or something, I could just go ahead and duplicate the color overlay, and I could do Image, Adjustment, Hue, Saturation. Let's say I want to make the side of it, I don't know, maybe a little bit more green. Sure. Then I could just take my lasso tool, click, 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 delete or mask that part, right? And I've got a little bit of a green overlay here. If I wanted to make it look a little bit more natural, like might go in and change my eraser. Again, I could mask this too. And then just by erasing parts of this, I might give that wood a little bit of age, right? Give it a little bit more character. Beyond that, what could I do? I could, if I so chose, add a little bit more character to this wood. And this means just adding a few different brush strokes to make some visual interest. So here are some brush strokes that I made. You can see it's very, very simple work. All I've done is I've gone into, if I double click that layer, I've gone into bevel and emboss, and I've changed these settings a little bit. And that's everything together. And so we've taken this very, very basic grayscale geometry and we've turned it into a board with a little bit of character to it. And that's just kind of the general process that we use for photorealism. So again, just to recap, get your grayscale line fill 3D geometry rendered out for yourself. Secondly, find some nice flatly lit textures. Thirdly, desaturate your images. Also, distort those layers and blending modes to texture your objects. Again, you don't have to desaturate. You could just move on if you wanted. And then lastly, paint on your color, add in any additional lighting or decals, and create painted looks using mixing brushes. Again, remember, all the heavy lifting is usually done with your layer blending modes, which are right here. And again, typically anything between darken and I would say hard light are generally used to create these sorts of effects. So yeah, that's a little bit about how this is done. And yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks for your time.